people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Set to go down on the undercard of the quote-unquote Battle of the Brave, Janibek Alimkhanalai's big homecoming fight. On that undercard, we're going to be seeing Balaussa Muzdiman, a native fighter from Kazakhstan, like Janibek Alimkhanalai, like Gennady Golovkin, who I think she bears more of a likeness to in terms of methodology, and you'll see what I'm talking about. She's going to be facing America's own Rosalinda Rodriguez in what is a bantamweight contest. Bantamweight, that's where the both of these fighters campaign. Sporting an unblemished record of 6 wins with no losses, no draws, 5 knockouts, Balaussa Muzdiman debuted as a professional way back there in 2017 at age 20 in the lightweight division. She subsequently took a 6-year hiatus from the sport, only coming back in March of 2023 as a bantamweight at 118 pounds. And it would seem that since then, she's hit the ground running. She had 2 fights in 2023, 3 fights in 2024. Last in action in December of last year, opposite the ring, Sushila Virat, who she stopped in the first round of a contest scheduled for 8, now 27 years old, and making up for lost time. How to best describe Balaussa Muzdiman's methodology, this fighter's base style? Almost immediately, you can see the Soviet influence. You can see she's a Soviet-style boxer. Naturally, she's from Kazakhstan. In what areas she bears a striking resemblance to Gennady Golovkin is she's a mid-range to inside fighter, just like Gennady. Combinations, mid-range to inside, rapid-fire combinations. She's got some speed in those hands, but she's poised. Not overzealous with that speed at all. She uses it sparingly to catch the fighter in between the shots, in between the punches with quick counters. Very nice, very neat, while closing the distance. You see how she finishes off the combination with the lead hand to keep the opponent at arm's length and under her control, simultaneously protecting herself from any return fire and setting up the opponent for a backhand should they decide to come forward. Very good feat, whether bouncing out of range or closing the distance, cutting the ring off. Rather than just lunging forward and trying for punches, she moves parallel to her opponent, moving in the direction that her opponent is gonna be to meet her there and close off her exits. Hooks her right into a jab. Keeping the pressure on and beating those feet as her opponent tries to come forward, making her pay for her mistakes with counter shots in between. Very nice. Very nice indeed. As if the bantamweight division wasn't deep enough already, Balaussa Muzdiman is really something. Jab-heavy fighter with great fundamentals, great footwork, decent power, decent enough that she's got quite a few knockouts. Speed, too. That almost immediately, I was reminded of Gennady Golovkin in his heyday. Balaussa Muzdiman has serious potential so long as she can stay busy and stay active, climb up those ranks, and that's what she's been doing for the last 2 years. Staying busy, staying active, staying dangerous. Campaigning in the 118-pound division where Shernika Johnson reigns as WBA champion Dina Thorsland. She's got the WBC, WBO, and Ring Magazine titles, and Shurita Metcalf. She's got the IBF. So at only 6-0, I don't get the sense that Balaussa is on the verge of fighting for an alphabet title just yet, but she is fighting unbeaten Rosalinda Rodriguez, who has a lot more pro experience than Balaussa does. It is a step up in class for her, a sharp deviation from the kind of girls that she has been fighting. That Rosalinda is a better fighter than any fighter that Balaussa has fought so far, and in spite of all of that, based on what I've seen, I like Balaussa's chances in that fight, and that will move her up those ranks. But even with a win over Rosalinda Rodriguez, Balaussa's handlers shouldn't jump the gun because she's never actually fought in an 8-rounder before. That is, she's fought in contests that were scheduled for 8 but ended much sooner due to those knockouts. 5 of her 6 fights ended by way of knockout. So she needs those rounds. I mean, before you challenge for an alphabet title, you need to be pushed a little harder. Fighting in 8-rounders, subsequent 10-rounders. Condition herself, condition her fitness, and get used to a little pushback. Moreover, not panicking if and when she is pushed, because this is a deep division. There are a lot of talented fighters in it, and Balaussa is just one. So if she beats Rosalinda, and I think she's going to, that's not the cue to target an alphabet title right after that. There is more work that needs doing.
Well, if you're so goddamn confident, why are you telling her to pump the brakes?
Well, the scalp of unbeaten Rosalinda Rodriguez is a good scalp, but there are bigger threats in this division than Rosalinda.
Get more into that fight, and we'll talk more about it as the fight date approaches.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, as it pertains to amateur boxing, the vote for boxing's inclusion at the 2028 LA Olympics to take place this week after IOC board's proposal.
IOC, the International Olympic Committee.
The committee that stripped the IBA of recognition due to match fixing and corruption has now accepted world boxing to stand in their place. A vote for boxing to be welcomed back to the Olympic Games in time for LA 2028 will take place later this week after the Executive Board, EB, proposed its inclusion to the International Olympic Committee, IOC. World Boxing, which is set to be the recognized body for the sport at the Games, has backed the EB's proposal. The vote will take place this week at the 144th IOC session in Costa Navarino, Greece, which will be held from March 19th to March 21st. IOC President Thomas Bach. After the provisional recognition of world boxing in February, we were in a position to make this decision, Bach said on Monday. This recommendation has to go to the session, but I'm very confident they will approve it so that all the boxers of the world then have the certainty they can participate in the Olympic Games in Los Angeles. President of World Boxing, Boris van der Vorst, said this is a very significant and important decision for Olympic boxing and takes the sport one step closer to being restored to the Olympic program. I have no doubt it will be very positively received by everyone connected with boxing at every level throughout the world who understands the critical importance to the future of the sport of boxing continuing to remain a part of the Olympic movement. On behalf of everyone at World Boxing, I would like to thank EB of the IOC for the trust they have placed in our organization, and we hope for a positive outcome when the IOC session meets this week.
I believe it was in 2023 when the IBA, who was in charge of all the amateur boxing, was stripped of recognition by the IOC due to alleged match fixing and corruption.
I mean, for years we heard about how corrupt the amateur system was, all the while being governed by the IBA, that it finally came to a head.
So that when they were stripped of recognition, amateur boxing as a whole was under jeopardy of not being in the next Olympic program. Thankfully, World Boxing stepped up to the plate.
The combined efforts, a lot of individuals working hard to make sure the next Olympics feature the amateur boxers. For them, that's their Super Bowl.
Their World Series, that's their NBA playoffs.
World Boxing understands that being part of the Olympic Games is a privilege and not a right. And I assure the IOC that if boxing is restored to the program for LA 2028, that World Boxing is completely committed to being a trustworthy and reliable partner that will adhere to and uphold the values of the Olympic Charter. There was at first a chance that there would be no boxing at the Olympics for the first time in the competition's history. Following the IOC's decision to strip the International Boxing Association, the IBA, of its recognition in June of 2023, having been suspended before that since 2019. The Tokyo 2020 Games and the Paris 2024 Games were supervised under a special task force as a result, but the sport's future from 2028 onwards was thrown into serious doubt after not being included in the program for LA. Now, World Boxing, whose mission statement drew out its plans to preserve boxing at the Olympics is in the frame, and it looks likely that boxing will be back in time for LA in 3 years. Earlier this month, the IOC said of World Boxing, the assessment concluded that World Boxing has continued to make progress regarding the identified areas of consideration in order to be recommended for IOC provisional recognition as the international federation within the Olympic movement governing the sport of boxing at world level. World Boxing is currently composed of 84 national federations and counting from 5 continents, and its chair of the Olympic Commission is former middleweight world champion Gennady Golovkin.
Final steps are underway to ensure that boxing is a part of the next Olympics, and that's welcome news. It's an essential cog in the big machine, the amateur system.
I only wonder what the qualifications for these competing amateurs are going to be given the controversy in the last Olympic Games, the Emain K-Leaf and Lin Yu-Ting situation. That was the center of the conversation, the center of attention, more than what other fighters might have won a gold medal.
That's what everybody was talking about.
And the discrepancy between the IBA and the IOC as to what qualifies an athlete to compete in a category, particular to this conversation, a women's category. It would seem that the IOC, who was acting in the IBA's stead under extenuating circumstances, chose to qualify the fighters with little more than just a passport,
sparking widespread outrage that the IOC appeared to have allowed 2 men to compete in a women's category. That's just how people took it. That's how they interpreted the situation and what created the controversy.
The feeling that the IOC didn't try hard enough to quell this controversy, quell this situation, because these 2 athletes were banned by the now defunct IBA.
IBA said they were a couple of guys.
They said they performed a chromosomal test, and it came back that they were guys, where the IOC chose to ignore that on the premise of what it said on their passports. I just wonder that another situation like this one doesn't happen at the next games.
Why did they ignore the IBA?
It's likely because they were stripped of recognition by the IOC the year before. But the following year, I mean, if nothing else, that does raise enough concern that maybe you need to look a little deeper into this. And it seems like the IOC chose not to. So I just wonder, are we going to see another situation like that? Because that ain't good for the sport of boxing either.
Put the cart before the horse. The final steps are underway to ensure that boxing is in the next Olympic program. And first, we have to see to that. Then comes the other stuff.
And finally, it's Fight Week. It's Fight Week for unified junior middleweight champion Sebastian Fundora, though not without some criticism, as veteran promoter Tom Loeffler says he took the safer route by securing a Cordell Booker fight. Promoter Tom Loeffler insists that the prolific knockout artist Sergey Bohachuk was ready to face the WBC and WBO champion Sebastian Fundora on March 22nd. The unified champion at junior middleweight was supposed to collide with former welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr., headlining an Amazon Prime pay-per-view show next month. But with Spence extending his hiatus after losing to pound-for-pound star Terence Crawford back in 2023, Fundora, 21-1 with 13 knockouts, will now face Cordell Booker instead. The pair will square off at the Michelob Ultra Arena in Vegas, Nevada, and while Fundora has retained the same date, his main event slot is no longer taking place on a pay-per-view card. As it happens, the Towering Inferno had the opportunity to enter a far more appealing matchup against Bohachuk, whose promoter claims that his efforts fell on deaf ears. I reached out to PBC, Fundora's promoter, but they never really engaged with it, Loeffler told Boxing News. I have a great relationship with Louis DeCubas and Samson Lukowicz, but got the feeling that they wanted to take a lower profile fight after the Spence Jr. fight didn't happen. Sergey would have been ready for March 22nd, but I guess they went down the safer route with Cordell Booker.
Safer route is right.
Bohachuk comes off a 6th-round stoppage win over late replacement Ishmael Davis after Israel Madrimov withdrew from their scheduled clash due to illness. Before that, the 29-year-old floored Virgil Ortiz twice in a thrilling encounter last August, but ultimately lost a highly contentious majority decision. Since then, Bohachuk has been clamoring for a shot at Fundora, a fighter he was set to face last March. the pair's dust-up was originally slated to take place on the undercard of Tim Tszyu versus Keith Thurman before Fundora was presented with the opportunity to face Tszyu instead, which he did, and he won. That's how he became unified champion, though it didn't take Samson Lukowicz long to set his sights on a welterweight who was coming off a devastating loss instead of defending those belts against more game Quarry.
So let's address the criticism. Is Sebastian Fundora on a safer route?
He absolutely is, and he has been from the moment that he won those 2 Alphabet titles, because they made it their mission to go after Errol Spence Jr. of all people, who we all saw what happened to him the last time that he fought. Why would you want to fight him so bad? And it's obvious why, because that's safer than fighting someone else. That's safer than fighting Terrence Crawford, who beat him. That's safer than fighting somebody at junior middle.
So when that doesn't happen and you wasted all those months pursuing that fight, you can then land on this guy.
Unless I'm mistaken, we're about a year out from the Tim Tszyu fight. It's been that long.
Time is the one thing you don't get back.
And so it would seem that Sebastian Fundora's reign as unified champion has been extended a while longer. He's being allowed this voluntary title defense against Cordell Booker. And after that, while Terrence Crawford is WBO interim champion and he's Sebastian's mandatory, we know he's not after him. He's gonna fight Canelo in his very next fight. So he's getting no pressure from Terrence.
No pressure from the WBO, not yet. But I figure that after this weekend, he might.
If he actually stays unified champion coming off a year layoff. Xander Zayas of Puerto Rico, who's promoted by Top Rank, he is now ranked at number 1 by the WBO. And I expect that after this weekend's fight, Xander's gonna put the squeeze on him. And it's not just Xander, I think Virgil Ortiz will too.
He's the WBC's interim champion. Looked very impressive opposite the ring, Israel Madrimov.
This division is far too deep for a unified champion to be voluntarily defending his title against a Cordell Booker. Nothing against him, but this is a big part of the problem in the American boxing scene. You have too many fighters and too many managers making safe decisions like this one that don't get anybody excited.
So when interest in the sport starts to decline, you know why.
So that after this weekend, the pressure is on. Sebastian's gonna be on the hook to fight one of these guys, either Xander Zayas or Virgil Ortiz. I don't know which one he's going to land on, but it doesn't matter because he might have to forfeit the other title to that other fighter. You've been allowed a year to do nothing, to piss the time away chasing Errol Spence.
Well, you never should have been after to begin with.
It's pretty goddamn pathetic that he did that right in front of everybody. You're chasing around Errol Spence Jr. for what? Because he just got his ass kicked and he can't make 147 anymore?
You've run out of time.
You're very close to it. After this weekend's fight, things are going to get serious for Sebastian.
Tom Loeffler says that he went the safer route, that he could have fought Sergey, who he was supposedly going to fight well over a year ago. I don't actually think they were ever going to go through with that fight. I think that whole time it was the PBC's intention to swap out Keith Thurman for Sebastian Fundora.
Yeah, but according to Tom, they were going to fight.
Neither Tom Loeffler or his charge, Sergey Bohachuk, were in on the gag.
Hard to imagine that a Samson Lukowicz fighter would fight a guy like Sergey Bohachuk willingly. Yeah, right.